Hello, my name is Christopher Scalia. I'm a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, and I will be teaching Jane Austen's Persuasion for the Humanities at Hertog this January. The class is from 6 to 8, Tuesdays and Thursdays through a couple of weeks in January. Persuasion was Austen's last completed work. She finished it in the summer of 1816 and was published over a year later in December of 1817. The title page says 1818, but back then they would kind of post-date the title pages if a work was published in December. Persuasion is often described as her most mature work, her most subtle work. You often encounter words like autumnal and melancholy associated with this novel. It's called autumnal not only because there's a great scene when she's taking a walk during the autumn and thinking about great poems about the season, but there's just a mood of fall-like atmosphere, melancholy atmosphere about this novel. The novel is about Anne Elliott. She is old, 27, which is very old by the standards of Jane Austen's heroines. And she's 27 when the novel begins, but we learn early on that 8 years before, she had fallen deeply in love with a young man named Wentworth. Wentworth was an undistinguished naval officer at the time of their meeting, and they planned to get married, but Anne's family and friends intervene and say, this is not a good match. And the main reason is that Anne Elliott's family is a distinguished and landed family. That is, they are aristocratic. Wentworth, on the other hand, as just a naval officer, well, he's a nobody. So immediately there are some issues of social standing and class raised in the novel. The novel begins, in fact, with a very funny moment. We find out early on that her father, Sir Elliott, is obsessed with his background and his lineage, and he only likes really reading one book. And that's always a bad sign with Austen characters. People who don't like to read are generally bad characters. And that's the case with Sir Walter. The one book he likes to read is called The Baronetage, which is basically a record of all the landed families in England. And he just likes reading about himself and his background and his lineage. He's obsessed with it. He's fallen on hard times because his wife has passed away, and since she died, he really spends money too lavishly, and he can no longer afford living on his estate. So he needs to rent it out. And he rents it out to, what do you know, a naval family who happens to be related to Anne's former fiancé, Wentworth. And so 8 years after breaking up the engagement, Anne finds herself in Wentworth's social circles again. Much awkwardness and anxiety ensues, and Anne has to come to grips with her regret over ending the engagement with Sir Walter and ascertaining whether he has moved on and what their relationship will be in the future. So you can see why this is called an autumnal novel. There's a lot of nostalgia in this novel, not only in the case of Anne, who's nostalgic over this love she lost and really regrets letting go of, but also in the case of Sir Walter and his family and his clinging on to this power and wealth and status that his family had. He has 3 daughters. He has no sons. So he's the state or the future of the family line is very much in doubt. And that's one of the reasons the marriages matter so much in this novel and why he's so concerned about who his daughters marry. Anne's family, as is often the case in Austen novels, is full of superficial and stupid people. And I'm not being mean there. I mean, Austen calls her characters stupid pretty often too, so it's not just me. Anne uh, surpasses all of these characters because she is very perceptive, very sympathetic, um, and people often come to her for advice, but they underestimate her. They really take her for granted. The great literary critic Harold Bloom likes to point out that everybody takes Anne for granted, including readers. We underestimate just how great a character she is because Austen draws her so subtly and so convincingly. Um, let me say one more thing about this. This is a remarkable novel because it anticipates the dying of one age and the birth of another age. That is, especially the growth of a meritocracy as represented by Wentworth and the other members of the military in this novel. Um, we get the sense that Sir Walter uh, and other members of that family struggle to recognize the importance that the naval officers, the important role they play in the future of Britain. The novel is set right at the end of the Napoleonic Wars. These naval officers secured the future of the British Empire. But despite that, Sir Walter is very snobbish about whether the naval officers merit becoming part of his family. So it's a really fascinating consideration of what matters and what should matter in a family and contributions to a nation. It's also a fascinating novel because it's about, in large part, it's about bad advice. It's called Persuasion, and that persuasion refers in part to Anne's being persuaded to make a bad decision when she's younger because she listens to people in positions of authority. The novel is not a radical novel by any extent of the imagination. Um, I mean, let's face it, the Navy is celebrated. That's hardly a radical thing to do, but it does get us to consider the mistake Anne made in listening to people in positions of authority and failing to consider her own better judgment and follow her own inclinations, and then the regret that follows that. This is the fourth time I've taught humanities at Hertog. The second time I've taught an Austen novel. I always enjoy these sessions and these seminars because the students always come prepared to have great conversations, and I always appreciate that this always sharp group of students is willing to spend their winter break having serious discussions about classic works of literature. I think that says so much about the students who participate in the humanities at Hertog. People of older generations like to wring our hands and worry about the youth today. And maybe there is a lot to worry about, but I always feel much more optimistic when I teach these sessions because the students are always very, very impressive. And I come away knowing a lot more, not only about them, but about the works under discussion. In this case, I'm really looking forward to Jane Austen's underrated and subtle and autumnal final work, Persuasion. I read Persuasion, I don't remember what year in college, but when I was in college at William and Mary, I remember the classroom I was in. I remember my professor, Robert McCubbin, who's the most important professor I had at William and Mary. He really made me want to major in English, and he directed my senior thesis. and forever. And in fact, he introduced me to a lot of the novelists I write about in my new book, 13 Novels Conservatives Will Love, but probably haven't read. Um, so I remember vividly the experience of reading the novel, and there are a couple of scenes in particular that have stuck with me since I read it in that time in the late, must have been in the late 90s, probably 1997. There are a couple of famous scenes in the novel that I vividly remember discussing in that class. As I reread the novel recently, I am impressed by how much of it is so great that escaped my memory, or maybe even my notice the first time. Um, the quality of Austen's writing, the subtlety of Austen's writing, and the humor of her descriptions. There's a very funny passage early on about overweight people that I didn't remember at all and had me laughing out loud as I reread it in the airport. It's a book that stuck with me. Some of the details stuck with me, even as some of maybe more subtle details eluded me over the course of nearly 30 years. This is an important novel for one of the most important things younger readers can get from this novel is uh, I don't want to call it a lesson, but the inference about when to take advice. Um, as I mentioned before, Anne Elliott makes a big mistake when she's younger, and the big mistake is listening to people who were giving bad advice. And she was right to respect the opinions of people in positions of authority, but she really gave them too much respect. Her father, in particular, is a foolish and selfish and superficial man, and she knew that at the time, and nonetheless took his advice seriously. She also took the advice of a close family friend named Lady Russell, who really should have known better than to give the advice she gave Anne. Uh, so a lot of great novels are about young people figuring out how to discern and judge for themselves. And Persuasion is so powerful because Anne learns this lesson very late and lives basically 8 years in regret of the advice she took. So it's an important novel for young people. I think young people will especially appreciate it for that reason, even if the character is older than Austen's typical heroine. Persuasion is also really important for young people and valuable for young people because it shows us the importance of what you might call the sympathetic imagination, the ability to understand other people, to sense what they're going through and what they need in a given time and situation. Anne Elliott is a remarkable character because she is especially sensitive to the needs of other people. This is why people like her so much, and this is also why people take her for granted as much as they do. Great fiction in general, not all great fiction, not all great novels, but many great novels, and especially Austen's novels, help us see the complex way smart people and good people think and the way they are able to understand other people. And Anne Elliott is a particularly great example of this kind of character. One of the odd things about Persuasion is that uh, it has very few scenes. Uh, a lot of it is the narrator describing things. The narrator is such a powerful voice, though, that you don't mind it. You really like just getting descriptions of a lot of what people are thinking and what is going on. Especially early in the novel, we get a lot of descriptions of why people do things and what they're doing. We do get scenes, but we don't get very long scenes. Um, And the old adage is writers should show and not tell. There's a lot of telling in Persuasion, but it's fascinating and it's powerful. It's really impressive narrative technique. But yeah, there is one scene in which in a legendary or an especially famous scene in which a character foolishly leaps um, off a wall and takes a tough fall because she had expected somebody to be able to catch her. And now you may take this as a metaphor for one's ability to trust other people and what happens when the people we trust aren't there for us. But even apart from that, it's a very dramatic moment, really a terrifying moment, which everybody is very afraid of the physical consequences of that leap. And the leap also plays an important role in kind of setting different plot elements in motion too. You should never have to apologize for reading a great novel, and especially a great Austen novel. We're approaching the 250th anniversary of her birth. It will be December 16th, 2025 will be that anniversary. So what better time to read and study one of the English language's greatest novelists than around this great commemoration of her birth. And what makes her such an important novelist and so worthwhile is, well, I would point to two things. First, few people had such a mastery of our language than Jane Austen. And to read an Austen novel is to become aware of what great writers are capable of and what the English language itself is capable of. The subtlety of her writing, the beauty of her sentences, the penetration of her insights into different human characters and the varieties of human life make her always worthwhile to read. And secondly, what makes her worthwhile is what makes most great writers worthwhile, which is it makes us more aware of what it means to be human. It doesn't make us more human, but it gives us a window into the varieties and the complexities of human life and human character. And in the process, hopefully makes us better judges of human characters ourselves and better agents of our own lives as we put ourselves in the shoes of the characters and learn from the characters that we encounter in Persuasion.